I'm nervous about sitting between you because you might start arguing again and I can't handle it.
You're our mediator. Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Simon of Savageries and today I'm joined by Russell from Ink and Paper Blog and Julie from BookTube, but she doesn't do a channel anymore, which I'm furious about because I loved it. But she does do Instagram. Instagram's amazing because it's basically book and cat porn.
Oh, you know,
we thought we would do a let's chat about plot versus whatever. What's the other option?
No plot.
And that's because Russell was saying the other day that he doesn't really like plot in books, and I was like, "Are you?" Well, I can't say what I said.
No, you can't. That being said, we were talking about crime and thrillers, and I said I don't read them because I don't need plot to be my driving force.
But you say you don't need it, but can a plot-driven book work for you?
It depends.
So you don't read any thrillers?
No.
You were like, oh no, I don't feel like I can read thrillers because I've not read thrillers or something. Like you didn't feel like you know the genre, so you can't read it.
Oh, we were talking about Snap, which was
which I've just given you.
Yes.
Snap.
And I said that I didn't feel that I could judge whether it should be on the long list or not because I don't read thrillers, so I don't know merit-based how it is as a thriller.
And my response was, it doesn't matter what genres you read, you can still judge a book just on its writing.
Yes.
Right, and if it's on the list for a literary prize, you read it, so you would know. Hopefully there's a literary aspect to it that might appeal to you.
Do you know what it reminded me of a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit? It reminded me a little bit of Kate Atkinson's Crime, her Jackson Brodie books.
Huh, I haven't read them.
Because what I love about her books so much is that they are literary, but they're not... The thing I have with literary that I don't like the word is that it makes it sound...
Lofty?
Yeah, lofty, but also a bit pretentious and a little bit elitist. That's the word I was looking for. And Snap isn't. It's about... Well, I won't give too much away because it's one of those books. It's about a woman who basically leaves her kids in a car, goes to phone somebody for help and just vanishes. And so you follow her kids later on and learn out what happened then, but also what's happening to them now. But it really looks at society, it looks at kids who are left to fend for themselves, and so it looks at so much, but people are like, oh, it's a thriller, so it shouldn't be on the list.
Well, you just said something that I think gets to the heart of this debate. That literary fiction could be seen as lofty, and to me, maybe the equivalent of that is when people say that they don't like plot, it makes it sound as if plot is inherently dumb, or it just sounds a little judgy. Like, what is a book that does or doesn't have plot?
But also, I think a book has to have something that makes you go through it. So there has to be...
Well, and what I meant when I said... it's time for me to defend because it's really the two of them against me in this conversation.
It's not because
it's not.
But
it's not.
For me, I don't need.
Where I stand
so for me, I don't need a book where the whole the thing is all action in order to move the narrative forward. And I feel like in thrillers, normally it is the action or the murder or the search and the hunt where there's not a lot of character building or scene building going on. It's just sort of this action adventure sort of thing moving forward. And I haven't read a literary thriller, and I don't usually use the word literary very often. But for example, Normal People by Sally Rooney. So Sally Rooney, it's got a very thin plot.
No, it hasn't. It's got a massive plot.
It has a thin plot.
It's got a massive plot.
That book
the whole plot is about the relationship between two people.
And that's all the plot is.
No, but it's over several years with them being in relationships with other people, so there's huge plots.
The plot is very straightforward and very simple.
What's the driving force in that book? It's the quality of the
prose,
prose,
relationship, right? It's the prose, and it's about people.
But with their relationship, what is it about their relationship that you're reading it for? You're reading it to find out where it goes. That's plot.
But
nobody can see.
I think maybe the definition of plot is different.
Can I call a timeout and ask for an example of a book that doesn't have a plot? Because what does that mean to not have a plot? Like, do we have an example of what's plot-driven versus not plot-driven?
Hot Milk.
Yeah, by Deborah Levy.
By Deborah Levy. And I would argue that that book has a very thin plot. It's more about relationships. And it's more about being up here than it is...
What do you mean being up there? I don't get that.
It's about the people and the thoughts, and you're more in a character's head about how they're developing as a person. Where you know what I mean?
I think you're talking about character study versus action-driven stories.
Yeah.
In that case, I'm all for a character study, but I would argue that that's still a plot.
I think that's the thing. It's when I think plot, I think thriller, or I think horror novel, or I think something that is driven.
But what about Cersei? Cersei's all plot. Yes, it's about the character of Cersei, but it's a huge... That is an adventure story.
It is an adventure story. I did enjoy Cersei as well. But to me, Cersei was also about redefining the role of women, making someone who was on the periphery, showing how they actually became important.
So what you're saying, I think...
And you haven't read Cersei, but what I'll say is that it's a lot about her developing. How does she become who she wants to be?
Yeah, but I think...
She's sitting on an island. There's not a lot of plot while she's sitting on an island.
I think what it might boil down to is what is valuable to you is the writing quality as a device to propel you forward in a book. Is you want more of that prose, you want to see how it unravels, you want to see the character study, and you don't want books where it's not so much about the quality of writing, it's just about what action's going to happen next and next and next and next. And I think that there are books that fall in between the two, that have good writing and a
Well, my favourite books are plot-driven, character-driven, and amazing writing.
Yeah.
That's my dream book.
Yeah.
But I think the best books combine all of those, and I think there seems to be there is a bit of a wave sometimes of people feeling like it has to be verses, but actually if they work together, those are probably the best books for me, and that's where I love Sarah Waters, for example, because she really built her characters. There is a huge amount of plot, but the writing is really, really good. Sometimes people can do a bit of it, and I think it's that judgy thing where people are like, oh, it's a really plot-driven book, so it must not be very good. But actually, and there are some books that don't have massive amounts of plot for me that I really love, like Claudia Day's Heartbreaker. Doesn't have a huge amount of plot, yet there's a massive amount going on, because as you realise as you're reading it, there's these little subtle subtexts where you're like, oh, right, okay, wow, that's happening, you have to reread. But I think it's actually probably more that you feel that way about a genre more than you feel about plot.
Well, and the thing is,
this is actually what you think. Okay.
And I don't think I'm judgy.
We're done.
I'm not judgy about plot-driven books and stuff. I just said I don't need plot. I prefer not to have it.
I find it hard to read a book that doesn't have plot.
And I think, maybe it's
the context of plot
maybe it's plot. I mean, I can have a very thin plot. Maybe that's what it is. It's like, Stoner, which is probably my favorite book, or Normal People. I find that those books both have a very thin, straightforward plot. It's about relationships, and it's very linear. There's no going off in other direction.
I just find that, do you know what, and this is really fascinating, because we've both read that book. I feel like it's a totally different reading experience, because I just thought that book was so... It is about these two people and their lives going forward. That's huge plot.
Yeah,
because there are all sorts of twists in what happens with their relationship, and it involves other people around them, and I think that is really plot-driven.
Oh, Russell, do you have an example of what you would think of as a plot or action-driven story that you actually did like?
Yeah, I would probably say something that is more epic. So Pachinko by Min Jin Lee.
I've still not read that.
I really enjoyed that book, but that's a family drama with a lot of plot, as things happen and then things happen to the family, and I really got immersed in that world, and I learned a lot about Korean Japanese culture and all that kind of stuff. So that book is more plot, because you're following this family through 60, 70 years.
And then, I know you love The Incendiaries. For you, is that a book that has a thin plot?
It does have a thin plot.
But that for you is a propulsive read because of the prose?
Yes, well, and that book is a lot about faith. So it's a lot about, I always summarize it as, you have a main character who has lost faith, you have someone who is searching for faith, and then you have someone who's creating faith because he's creating a cult. And the girl searching for faith gets involved.
So that sounds to me like creating a cult. That sounds like a huge bit of plot.
But he just creates
Isn't that weird?
But we don't, that's like 4
sentences. It's not spelled out in the narrative, really.
Okay.
Yeah. You know it happens, but it isn't
And do you think, because you've read it, do you think that's a book
I've not finished it.
Okay.
It's a book where I got lost in the prose and when you read the dust jacket of that book, the plot sounds really interesting, but the way that the prose unveils the plot to me wasn't grabbing me.
Yeah.
And it's funny because my feelings about this whole topic have changed so much in the past 10 years.
Just in the last 10 minutes.
Well, that's it. No, but when I was in college, I wanted nothing to do with plot. I wanted all prose. I wanted to see people do interesting things with words and characters. Mm-hmm. And I was all about poetic license, and I wanted that. And now I don't know what's changed, but I want plot. I want to be driven forward. I want the story.
I think it can be where you are in your life as well, though, because I think when I'm busier, I need a book that has plot and character that will pull me through it.
Yeah.
And because otherwise I just can't get into it. But I think it's really interesting because Gav used to say on The Readers that he used to find the books the most irritating, the ones where it's like 80 pages of a woman walking to the shop thinking about her marriage and divorce. And I get that because that's actually quite for me now. But then we were also talking weirdly on The Readers earlier that like when me and Thomas first met, I was really into modern classics. And now I just don't really read them anymore. And I think our tastes change all the time. Prose alone doesn't do it for me anymore. And I think it's interesting with Eamon McBride, that was one rare book where it was all the prose that just kept me through, but that's because it was so bizarre and so quirky and so you couldn't stop reading it in a weird way. But I think now, if it doesn't have a plot, I just find it a bit... But that said, if a book is only plot and only action, I can find that tricky. Like, is it Shari Lapena?
Yeah.
And she is all plot. The characters are not very well done. It's not even particularly well written. But what's brilliant about those books is they're the perfect thing for when you're just in a real like, oh, I don't know what to read next, because you can't stop reading them.
When I was younger and coming out in junior high and dealing with that whole thing, I read a lot of epic fantasy and Stephen King because I needed to escape to a plot.
Absolutely.
And so I would read stuff where I could just become part of a world and I was on some quest with someone and I could just totally escape. I think as I've gotten older and more comfortable with myself, I haven't needed sort of that escapism.
God, what does it say about where I am in my life right now?
I was thinking of a book that has no plot, or has very little plot, that I think is brilliant, is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. You know, that's one woman.
Oh God, look.
But I think that book literarily is just amazing, the words and the language.
Boy.
But it's a woman going shopping for a party she's going to throw that night
it's
before.
really boring.
See, I would disagree.
No, but I think it's interesting as well because I think there's certain points in your life where I had a phase where I was reading a lot more non-plot driven, but much more people thinking about where they are in their lives, and sort of it was much more about what somebody's experiencing emotionally, mentally. Now I would say that is still a slight, very thin plot, but that was where I was just trying to work out stuff.
Did you read Fever Dreams by Samantha Schweblin?
No.
See, that's another book that doesn't have really a plot.
Well, we're not reading it then.
I find that book, I always tell people that's the most brilliantly bizarre, crazy book. I can't tell you what it's really even about, but I've never stopped thinking about it.
But there are books like that. Like I was saying, there's that, we were talking about Hot Milk by Deborah Levy. There's not huge plot in that, but at the same time, as I think you can guess, there's so much in that book that you don't necessarily
need a plot.
Well, the plot's there, but it's all the stuff around it, like, because actually the plot is that it's about a mother and daughter who don't get on, and why do they not get on, which to me is plot.
It's thin plot though, right?
And see, I think that's quite meaty plot because you've got to work out why they don't get on, why they're in the situation, and why is one of them saying that they can't walk when they clearly can. Like but to me that's all plot because that's mysteries interwoven within.
And that's all character to me. I think that's just sort of our interpretation.
Yeah,
of how we read
I don't know why, but this is making me think about. What I got out of reading thin plot books with beautiful prose when I was in college was that I felt like they were revealing something to me about myself based upon how I was interpreting them. Because I think books with a thin plot are way more open to interpretation.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's what I've fed off of. And I'm just wondering what it means that now I like plot, because I'm not looking for a reflection of me. I'm looking for just what the characters are going to do and what the author is going to do and what their motivation is. And I don't know what that distinction is, that I've sort of lost interest in how I'm going to interpret something. I want it shown to me, and then I can kind of question the plot.
But you're still,
I don't know what
I think that's
about.
Still you questioning it, but just in a different way.
Exactly, yeah.
Because also, I mean, one of the things is there's no right or wrong way to read any book. That's what's so interesting about books. Like, you can't... And I find that really interesting.
That might be
well, you could.
Well, that's true.
And you need to if it's a manga book.
That is true.
Also, yeah.
That is true.
The thing is, it's just that thing of there isn't a right answer.
We're all friends?
We're all friends. I think we would all say that it's like the best thing about books is that it creates conversations like this,
but for
and
me,
we can recommend stuff to each other and argue about it,
and then refuse to read it,
and be friends for the rest of our lives.
I don't feel like you have to choose one or the other.
Absolutely.
Like for me, ideally, it has the three top things for me are storyline / plot, character, and the writing's got to be. I don't need really flowery floral writing. I just need really good I like quite sort of almost down to earth, but then that makes it sound like people are going to go, do you mean readable?
No.
I like a readable, but well, that's why we all read. That's why I find so weird.
Well, that's not why he's reading.
No, he's only reading.
No, but that's not true. Some books that I feel like the people are trying, like you mentioned Spectre, Clarice Spector earlier today. I find like she's trying too hard. Like I feel like the language is so much that you get lost and there's nothing actually being said. But I agree. I think it depends.
You are hard to please.
True.
And yet you're always so happy and positive about your books that you read.
He knows what he likes.
Because you know what you like.
That's
Yes,
it. I read what I like.
That's
so.
right.
Well, this has been fascinating. I've been fascinated the whole time I've been here.
I have. Always. Look who I'm pretending.
I got to meet this young lady and him in person, so it's
And these two are going to now do a podcast together, so I've created some kind of monsters.
So you get to hear more of this bookish bickering. Oh, I don't want to take that
Oh,
term. Sorry!
anyway.
Bookish bickering. That
Bookish
was our
bickering,
thing. Yeah.
yes.
There we go.
So on that note, we're going to go to the Castro. It's going to be
Bear
fun. Yes. I'll speak to you very, very soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.